Okay, so today 1.4, just subtracting integers. So what we say, you guys, we don't subtract, we add the opposite. So when I've had you use your parentheses, right, when I said if it's like -2 minus 3, or in that case 3 minus 8, I put the -8 in a parenthesis, so you know that you're adding them. You're adding the opposite. We get this from the additive inverses. Remember the other day when we did like -5 plus 5 or -2 plus 2? Okay? We are adding the opposite. Okay? So that's where that comes from. The double negative thing that I showed you just a little while ago in your book, that would be something like this. When you have a 3 minus a -2. So that double negative means that you're going to take those two negatives that are right next to each other and turn them into a big plus sign. That's how we get 5. Okay? So if you want to connect this, you know, just kind of connect the dots or something like that to remind yourself, oh, that's a big plus sign. Kind of is, right? It's a big plus sign. Okay? And so what we say about those is when we have two negatives next to each other, they make a positive. Does anybody remember that from 6th grade? Good. Okay. If you did not learn that in 6th grade, that's okay, because that's a really easy thing to remember. So it makes a big plus sign right in the middle. Does that mean that your answer will always be positive? No, because what if it was -3 minus a -2? Right? Then we would have -1. But if you have a positive minus a negative, you're going to get a positive answer. Any questions so far? Give you guys about 10 more seconds and I'm going to turn the page. So on the next page here, I'm going to give you several examples. Okay? Different things. Some we've already done, some that are new today. The first example is just ones we've been practicing. Get this here. Which is example 1, and that's just 8 minus 13. Now, if we're saying that we don't subtract, but yet we add the opposite, then we would say 8 plus a -13. Okay? So that's what this looks like. If you're using your parentheses, that's what that looks like. 8 plus a -13, and that equals -5. Remember this from last week and Tuesday? Hopefully you remember 2 days ago, I hope. Okay? So that's example 1. Example 2, this is the one that seems to confuse people more. A lot of people write -3 right there, but it's not -3, is it? Does anyone know the answer? What do you think it is? -17, you're right. So we're taking the two negatives, we're adding them together, so now I have in parentheses -10 plus -7 equals -17. Do you need to write the parentheses every time? No. Once you understand the concept, you don't need to write the parentheses on these. Some things I'm a stickler about. I'll say, use parentheses. Like today I'm going to show you one of those. But for this, once you get it, you got it. Okay? So you add your two negatives together, keep it negative. What about that one? Well, that has a double negative. So now what we have is 1 plus 2 equals 3. Simple problem. So when you see those two negatives together with that parenthesis, you know it's an addition. Example 4. This one has the double negative, but you can see it has a negative 10 out front. So that means we'll get a negative answer. So we have a negative 10. That double negative makes it a plus 7. So we should get a negative 3. Any questions so far? Couple more examples. Actually, we're going to move on to evaluate and do a couple of those. Does anybody remember what evaluate means in math? Like if I said, evaluate, x equals 3, y equals 2, and then you would do something after that. Do you guys remember? What is it? Yeah, like plug it in, right? You're going to figure it out. Okay? So this is a case where I would say, please use parentheses every time. If you don't use parentheses, you're probably going to make a mistake. Okay? So here's example 1 for evaluate. We have this x equals a negative 6, y equals a negative 5, and we need to plug it in or evaluate it for the equation x minus y and find the sum. Raise your hand if you remember doing this in elementary school, where you had to plug in. Yeah. You do this pretty early in elementary school now. I think even the end of 2nd grade, they're doing this. You guys might not have done it till 3rd or 4th, though. But they are doing this earlier. So all you have to do is plug in these numbers into the x and the y. Okay? The reason you use parentheses is because you'll see you're going to get double negatives. If you don't use parentheses, you're going to forget one of your negatives. Okay, so now I use my parentheses. I plug in negative 6 for x. I plug in negative 5 for y. The negative in between, the minus sign and the xy, just goes straight down. Okay? So when I use my parentheses, you can see that I'm going to get that double negative. Do you guys see that double negative on the 5? So now it's basically saying negative 6 plus 5, right? Which is negative 1. The most common mistake people make is in subtraction problems like that, they don't use parentheses and they would do negative 6 minus 5. What's negative 6 minus 5? Negative 11. Is negative 11 and negative 1 the same thing? No. That's the most common mistake, so it's very important to use your parentheses. Example 2. M equals negative 15, n equals 8. And we're going to plug that into m minus n. Should we use parentheses? Yes. So we plug that right in. Even though I don't have a double negative, it's still important to use a parentheses. What's negative 15 and negative 8? When you add them together, what do you get? Negative 23. Good. So you're adding those two negatives together. I use parentheses there just to show you guys again that when we have these negatives, we're actually adding them together and keeping them negative. Common error on that is for people to put negative 7. It would only be negative 7 if it was a negative 15 plus 8. So just be careful. Any questions? Okay, the practice problems that we will do first are in your book. I want you to write these in your notes though, so that you can refer back to them. So, the first 5 and the first 12, you should be able to get done. Remember, the third page is always kind of like bonus. If you get through it, you could try it. They're a little more challenging on the third page. And I also listed your homework there for you, so you have a place to write it. I don't think you guys have your planners yet. Oh, you do? So you can write it there, or you can write it in your planner. It's also on the board. It's on the website. Okay? But we're going to do the practice first. If you get through all 3 pages of practice in the time, feel free to start your homework. However, I don't think you will make it through. Maybe a couple of you will before we go over it. Okay, so you might struggle a little on this practice. That's why we're practicing. Okay, the practice isn't for a grade. It's just to see if we can work things out. So go ahead and start that whenever you're finished writing that down.